Slade Chapter 1 continued. The night was ugly, thick with fog. It was the kind of night that clung to you like a slick bleach residue. Slade turned his collar up to the wind and lowered his hat against the spitting mist of rain. Petals was a good mile and a half away from his office, but he enjoyed walking, even in nights like this. His shoes scuffled along the uneven sidewalks that jutted up this way and that, like a great maw full of broken teeth. Sometimes the city felt just like that, a giant mouth waiting to swallow him whole. Slade was bound and determined to give it one hell of a bellyache, when or if that ever happened. The city gobbled down innocence and the filthy just alike without discretion. He walked on, trying to filter his mind to sift out the regret. He needed to focus on the case at hand. His attempts at concentration were weak and soon gave way to his old standby, wallowing in self-doubt. Somewhere in the distance, an alley cat yowled in weak protest of the weather. "I hear you, man," Slade responded, his words manifesting in billowy white puffs into the cold. Looking up from his feet, Slade caught a silvery glint out of the corner of his eye. The lick of light had been from a display window at McCarran's, one of the few pawn shops in town that still had the balls, or stupidity, they tended to be the same thing, to display some of their more expensive items in the window rather than behind a cage. There in the middle of the display sat a diamond necklace. The chain itself was being pushed as white gold. More than likely it was just cheap nickel. The diamonds were just large enough to be gaudy and obviously fake, but even fakes sparkled when displayed the right way. Sometimes you just had to church things up a little, as his grandmother would say. The price tag was a steal at only $300. The light from the necklace seemed to catch Slade's mind like a fishhook, tugging, dredging up something that he couldn't quite put a finger on. The thoughts came randomly: the smell of mold, the feeling of old waterlogged floorboards bowing under his feet, lime green lighting fixtures that looked as if they were made of wax. And then, just as quickly as these rogue memories had snuck into Slade's mind, they flitted away again. Still something lingered, like the taste of slightly soured food. Again, a cat complained about the weather. Slade turned from McCarran's and headed down the sidewalk, counting his steps as he went along to keep his wandering mind from going too far. The counting kept him busy until he caught the glow of neon from Petals. As he approached, he could make out the rattle of janky blues being smashed out on a piano, a loyal rhythm thumping from a bass drum, keeping time like a faithful pocket watch. As Slade entered the bar, the smell of yeast and smoke wormed its way inside of his nostrils. The place wasn't too loud, like your typical bar. Conversations were hushed and often non-existent. Petals was not the type of place people went to make a big time of things. You came here to drink until the voices stopped, or came back, depending on who the drinker was. Slade took a seat towards the back of the bar, close to the rear exit. Experience had taught him it's always a good idea to keep an exit close by. Sliding into the dark red Naugahyde booth, he loosened his belt on his coat and held his hand up, his pointer finger in the air, signaling for a drink. After a short wait, Alice, Petals' one waitress, approached the booth with a bourbon. Neat. Weller Antique had been Slade's favorite spirit of the month. Alice was a plain woman, sort of hollow-looking, her straight brown hair kept high up on her head in a tight bun. Her dark blue waitress uniform hung too loosely on her petite frame. She looked like a woman who had simply been worn down. "What if I had wanted something different tonight? A little inconsiderate, don't you think?" Slade poked with just a hint of a smile. "You changed, Slade?" Alice laughed. "That'll be the day." She placed the drink on a small white napkin and headed back to the bar to refill the beer nuts. Slade took a sip from his glass. The liquor slipped down his throat, leaving behind a pleasant warm burn. An oaky caramel aftertaste lingered in his mouth. Looking up from his drink, he saw Tony, the bar's pianist, playing away in a full fever. Tony beat his fingers against the keys, jerking his head forward in rhythm with the music, his hands hammered out on that poor old instrument. Slade had always wished they had learned to play something, anything. There was something about the way that Tony played that made his performance look like an exorcism. Slade figured that everyone had demons. Beating the hell out of an instrument and bringing some beauty into the world seemed like as good a way as any to get rid of them. Slade caught a slightly sour smell that made his nose wrinkle. He knew who it came from. Floyd Skaggs shuffled up to Slade's table loudly and cleared his throat. "Yes, Floyd?" Slade asked, not looking up from his drink. Floyd scratched at his neck, which was red and patched with stubble. "Got something to talk to you about, Slade." He made a hacking sound, spitting a brownish bullet of mucus on the hardwood floor. "Classy, Floyd. Always keeping it classy." Slade sighed. Floyd was good for information, but rough on the eyes. His hair was wire straight and brushed sloppily to a part. It was a young boy's haircut on an old leather shoe of a man. His teeth were random in their placement and few in quantity. Floyd's eyes were, well, one too few in number. Sometimes ratting on people cost you. In Floyd's case, it cost him his right eye. A dirty black patch hit a gaping hole in pink scar tissue where a brown eye once had been. Floyd, tired of standing, slumped into the spot directly in front of Slade. The rickety chair let out a creaking whine, a warning that it might die at any moment. "A lot of people been turning up missing. Ain't that right, Slade?" Floyd scratched at his neck again. It blotched a deeper red in protest. Slade sat up, adjusting his balance slightly. He noticed a slight bulge in Floyd's waistband when he had taken a seat. Things felt wrong in the bar. There was a noticeable drop in noise, others thinking that the conversation between Floyd and Slade was far more interesting than their own. The piano player continued to punish his instrument, oblivious to the tension. Floyd leaned towards Slade. A slight grin crept its way across his cracked lips. "Lots of people missing, all right, and you doing a whole lot of nothing." Slade leaned forward as well, meeting Floyd's one good eye with his two cold gray ones. "You gotta have intel to do anything, Floyd, old boy. You know that. In here lately, you've been coming up dry." Slade didn't miss Floyd's slowly moving arm making its way beneath the table, but he did pretend to. "I'll tell you what, Slade," Floyd spat. "Maybe you ought to do your own dirty work. You an investigator. Do some investigating. Me? I'm done. And if you don't leave me be, you're..." Suddenly, there was a terrific slamming noise, followed by a high, piercing yelp. Floyd only had a moment to gape at his now impaled hand before Slade had flipped the table over on top of him, pinned hand screaming Floyd and all. Before Floyd could pull the deeply embedded dinner fork from his hand and push the table off of his body, Slade was on him. Tony stopped playing the piano. No one was listening to him anyway. Floyd started to let out another scream, but was quickly silenced by Slade's calloused hand and the glint of steel. Slade's blade, a double-edged, mean-looking dagger, rested right below Floyd's one good eye. "Now you listen to me, you mouthy little shit." Slade sighed, moving his weapon just a bit. A dash of light reflected off of its polished surface. "I'm going to let your mouth go, and you're going to tell me what I want to know. It's that, or you limp away from our little get-together, blind." Floyd grunted in response, not daring to nod his head for fear that Slade might slip with his sharp little friend. Quentin Slade was not the kind of man who slipped. I was just talking trash, Slade. I swear, I didn't mean nothing by it," Floyd pleaded. Slade reached beneath the table and yanked a .38 from Floyd's now urine-soaked waistband. "This means nothing?" Slade questioned, looking at the gun. "I'm hurt, Floyd. Really?" Slade slid his thumb against the cylinder release and dumped the bullets onto Floyd. Bright brass scattered across the floor in random directions. Bending over, Slade sheathed his knife in a motion practiced countless times before and grabbed one of the ejected rounds. "You, Floyd Skaggs, are going to sing. Is that understood?" He slid a bullet into the gun cylinder, spun it, and slapped it shut. "Each time I hear a tune that I don't care for, I pull the trigger." No, "Now see here!" a cracked voice interjected, Paul Gordon, the bar's owner, cautiously moved from behind the bar, his thin, hairy hands protectively in front of him. Slade, this isn't, a bit much? I mean, blood's bad for business, Trust me, Paul, Slade answered, not looking up from Floyd. What's the word on the street? Sing, Floyd. He cocked the .38's hammer. Why all the missing people as of late? You crazy son of a bitch! You don't... Floyd's words were cut off by the sharp click of the weapon's hammer striking as Slade pulled the trigger. Somewhere in the bar, a woman screamed. Floyd screamed louder. That's one chance down. Care to go for two? Slade asked. He planted the gun's barrel firmly between Floyd's eyes and asked Floyd for a better answer. Slade, man, I swear on my mother's grave, I don't know nothing. Floyd screamed. Wrong. Click. Answer. Click. Floyd. Click. Click. For the love of God, Slade, stop! Floyd yelled. One chance left, Floyd, Slade said flatly. No more chances. Just a choice. Spill your guts, or I spill what little brains you have in that rat's nest you call a skull, all over Paul's nice floor here. The school! The old Dub City Elementary School, you fucking psycho! That's what you're looking for, it's in the school. Floyd's body was racked with sobbing, stripped from any idea of power and control. He wept openly. The bar was quiet as the ears of a deaf man. Slade stood to his feet and opened the gun cylinder. He turned the gun so Floyd could see the chambers, which all currently stood empty. Upon the bullet, Slade said, picking a bright round out of his shirt sleeve. He tossed it at Floyd, who was still crying on the floor. But if you ever try to pull your piece on me again, I'll end you. Slade tossed the empty gun to his side and turned to leave. Sorry about that, Paul, Slade said, handing the shaken owner a $50 bill. Bull you are, Paul snapped, ripping the money from Slade's grip. Sorry's all I ever hear from you. Then you come right back in, ripping the place up like some drugged-up teen hooligan. Paul's hands were clenched white, his nostrils flare. I want you out of here, Quinn Slade. Paul jabbed a shaking finger into Slade's chest. You hear me? On my way now, Paul. Slade picked up his jacket and slid into it. Never even got to finish my drink. Slade sighed and headed for the door. The old Dub City Elementary School was a good 5 miles away. It was late. Slade was weary. The search could wait for just one more night.